In this video, I'm going to show you how I animated the cover art for the book Bandits. Hi, I'm Ben Marriott, and I upload weekly motion design and animation tutorials. I recently animated the cover art for the latest book by Sian Dantes. Sian is a pal of mine who goes by Furry Little Peach online. She's an amazing illustrator and author from Sydney, and has an incredible YouTube channel where she shares her ridiculously wholesome process and working life. She was also the biggest influence on me starting my channel. Bandits is her second children's book, and we thought the cover would be perfect for a looping animation. I animated the frame-by-frame portion of this in Photoshop. I like to use Adobe Animate for frame-by-frame and Rough Animator on the iPad as well, but none of these have the library of textured brushes that I need to achieve the same look as Sian's illustration. I'm using the free plugin Animation 2 to help me. Animation 2 is this toolbar with basic animation tools for Photoshop, so you can easily add frames and view onion skins. And I explained how to use that in my first video animating Sian's work. I've never actually animated a four-legged walk or run cycle before, except for this dog, but it's floating in space, so that really doesn't count. So I used a lot of reference. First, I tried filming my own dog, but that didn't quite work. So I got it mainly from the legendary Aaron Blaise. And you know they're good when on their website they have testimonials from Oscar-winning directors on there. So if anyone watching this happens to cop an Oscar one day, I'd love a testimonial too. I started by roughly animating the legs, hips, shoulders, and head to quickly get that running, leaping motion. And the left and right legs are actually identical. I just duplicated them, offset them by one frame, and moved the left leg slightly to the right of screen. I'm animating this at 24 frames per second on 2s, so there's one drawing every 2 frames. And this run cycle has a total of 7 drawings. On the next pass, I tidied up those legs so they fit in nicer with the shoulders and hips, and then animated his tail and main body shape. I'm using the wave principle in the tail so it has that slight whipping motion, and I reduced pretty significantly the amount of bounce in the head because it was just looking too ridiculous before. On the next pass, I added some secondary animation to the raccoon's ears, to its beard, and to the sack on the back as well. In the original cover, the tail is wrapped around holding the sack, but I thought having the tail waving in the wind would be a more dynamic and interesting animation, so Sian suggested putting it on the back instead, which I thought was a great solution. Then I roughed in the character animation. They're pretty static except for their hair and bouncing clothes. Now I really like the oversized hoodie design on Fig, this character sitting at the front, so I made sure to emphasize just how baggy and billowy that would be in motion. Fern's hair, the character at the back, was the hardest part for me to animate. I actually copied and scaled down the tail to use as reference for that, because they would be waving at the same speed. And because the character's hair has this almost triangular shape, as well as having waves on the edges of it, that was really tricky of me to animate into an overall waving motion. So I animated it with straight edges first, where it kind of looks a bit like an axe, and then added the wavy edges on another pass. With the roughs done, I made a quick version of the background animated in After Effects, really to make sure that it would work, with just a few sketches of the trees animating their position property, moving from right to left. And the trees moving closer are moving much faster to add some parallax and the illusion of depth. And I was pretty happy here, so now it was ready for the cleanup. For the cleanup process, I essentially needed to take these rough animations, turn down the opacity a fair bit, and then draw on top of them with the final colors. And of course, add texture at the same time. I had my reference close by on another layer, and it looked like Sian had filled in most of the shapes with a solid color and then gone over them again on top with pencil in a dense scribble texture. So that's what I did. I started with Bo the raccoon, and the first layer I just filled it in all grey. On a second layer I added the main scribble texture, and then another layer of texture for the darker layers in tail, then one for the face animation, and then one final layer for the outlines. I really wanted this to look as close as possible to the original artwork. I could have made a looping pencil texture and applied that to the layers in After Effects. I've got plenty of tutorials about that technique, but it wouldn't have had the subtleties by doing it this way, where the scribble is going in the same direction as the outlines on the edges in a few areas. And this is only 7 frames long, so it wasn't that daunting of a task. I did that same process for each character, animating each part on a separate layer, and I didn't redraw the face, hands, and legs each frame because they're pretty static, and it would have been a lot more work to have them looking consistent across all 7 frames, and I felt it was better in this case to have them move in just their position. And originally I drew Fig's hair far too up on her head, so in my next pass, I moved that hair down, I added Fern and secured the bag. And the last detail I added here was the base of Fern's slipper, flapping as they rode. They're Gucci slides, I'm pretty sure. And it's the combination of those little secondary animations, like on the ears, the beard, and the clothes, that I really think add up to sell the motion and give the animation as a whole a lot of charm. I rendered that out as a PNG sequence so that I could composite it together with the background in After Effects. Now, this cover wasn't originally designed for animation, so I did have to extend the background a little bit, but Sian had layered the artwork nicely, so that wasn't difficult. I had a layer for the very background that would stay static. I'd separated the bigger stars so I could animate them individually. I have a mid-ground layer of trees that loops seamlessly so that I can reuse the background.
Wow, it must be expensive to produce all these cartoons.
Well, we cut corners. Sometimes to save money, our animators will reuse the same backgrounds over and over and over again.
And then 2 variations of the foreground tree which could swipe past. Putting it all together in After Effects was pretty simple. It's not that much different from our rough animatic, we're just swapping out the layers for our cleaned up layers. These mid-tree layers are all just sliding to the left, a bit slower than Bo is running, and these foreground trees are sliding much faster, all just with a couple of position keyframes. And to make it loop seamlessly, I made sure the duration of my work area in frames was a multiple of 7, because our character loop is made up of 7 frames, and made sure that the trees were in the same position in the first frame that they were in the last frame. I originally had it half as long at a 42-second loop, but I wanted 2 different shooting stars in the background, so I doubled it and extended it to 84 frames, so I had time for both. Some subtle extras that I added in After Effects were those shooting stars, which was just a straight line that I drew with a pen tool, and then I added a mask to grow and shrink, revealing and making the shooting star disappear. And then on top of that, I added 2 roughen edges effects to match the textured style. The bigger stars sparkle just by scaling up and down, and I have all of that happening in a separate comp. I made the smaller stars sparkle in the background by first separating them onto their own layer, and then on the layer above them animating this fractal noise effect with the contrast way up to get some random black and white values. And then using that as a luma mat for those stars underneath, so that where the areas of this fractal noise is black, the layer of the stars underneath is transparent. And the random motion in that layer gives the stars a slight flickering effect at different times as I go in and out of transparency. I added a new adjustment layer at the top and added the noise effect and gave it an 8% noise, so it felt a bit more tactile, as if it was a scanned-in book cover. I also added a very slight shake as well to the whole animation by adding the transform effect to a new adjustment layer, and on the position property of that transform effect adding a wiggle expression so it shifts randomly 1.5 pixels 6 times a second. And that just gives it a slightly shifting look, as if it was misregistered or rolling through a film reel. Now in total, this took 3 full 8-hour days, but I did this in about 4-hour blocks over a few weeks. It took 8 hours to create the rough animation, 12 hours of cleaning up the main run sequence, and then 4 hours of compositing it all together in After Effects. Now that might seem like a long time to animate a few seconds of animation, but frame by frame animation takes a lot of time, even longer if it's textured like this. So it isn't unreasonable by any means. I've included the After Effects project file to download for free down in the description. I have stripped out all of Sian's original artwork though, to avoid a flood of bootleg books on the market like Bandits, but it's there if you want to take a closer look at how I set up the parallax, the expressions, and effects, so you can take a deeper dive. Thanks again to Sian for letting me animate this. Do check out her channel. To discover the best ways to learn motion design, I've created a short playlist of videos that I think you'll enjoy if you've made it this far. Please like the video and consider subscribing if you'd like more of these videos every week. I'll see you in the next video.